Fewer people can afford to borrow money. We call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes problems. Since prices rise, it raises interest rate. With higher interest rate, fewer people can afford to borrow money and it causes existing debt rises. Think about it, this is monthly payment on your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and have debt repayments, they have less money left over to spend. So spending slows. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop. And so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases when we have a recession. If the recession becomes too severe and inflation no longer a problem, the central bank will lower interest rates that causes everything pick up again. With lower interest rates, debt repayment will reduce and borrowing spending pick up. And we see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short term, debt cycle spending is constrained only by willingness and lenders borrow to provide receive credit. When credit isn't easily available, there is economic expansion. When credit isn't easily available, there is a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for a decade. But notice that bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth the previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people push it. They have inclination to borrow and spend more instead of paying back debt. It's human nature. Because of this, over a long period of time, debts rise faster than income created long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more indebted, lenders even more firmly extend credit. Why? Because everyone thinks things are going great. People just focus on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising. Asset value is going up. The stock market rose. It's a boom. It pays to buy goods, services, and financial assets with borrow money. When people do a lot of debt, we call it a bubble. So even though debt is growing, incomes are growing nearly as fast to offset them. Let's call ratio of debt income debt burden. So the long-term income continue to rise, that burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset value soar. People borrow a huge amount of money to buy assets as investment, causing the prices to drop even higher. People feel wealthy. So even with accumulation lots of debt, rising incomes and asset value help borrow remain creditworthy for a long time. But this obviously cannot continue forever. And it doesn't. Over a decade, debt burden slowly increases, creating larger and larger debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments start going faster than income, forcing people to cut back on the spend. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further, and the cycle reverses itself. This is a long-term debt peak. Debt burden have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, this happened in 2008. It happened in the same region it happened in Japan in 1989, and in the United States back in 1929. Now the economy began deleveraging. In a deleveraging, people cut spend, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed, the stock market crashes, social tension rises, and whole things start being almost itself the other way. As incomes fall and debt repayments rise, borrow gets squeezed, no longer creditworthy, credit drives up, and borrower can no longer borrow enough money to make that repayment. Scrambling to fill this hole, borrower reserves support to asset. The rush to sell assets froze the market. At the same time, expense spending for. This is when stock market collapses. The real estate market tanks and banks get in trouble. As asset drops, it crashes throughout the value of the collateral and borrower can put up drop. This makes borrowing even less credit worthy. People feel poor. Credit rapidly disappears. Less spending, less income, less wealthy, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This appears similar to last recession, but the difference here is that interest rate can be lowered to save the debt. In a recession, lowering interest rates will stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lowering interest rates doesn't work because the interest rates are already low and soon hit 0%. So the stimulus will end. Interest rates in the United States is 0% during the deleveraging in 1930 and again in 2008. The difference from recession and deleveraging is that in deleveraging, borrowing debt burdens have simply gotten too big and can't be relieved by lowering interest rate. Lenders usually realize that it becomes too large and every pay back, borrower lost the ability to repay and the collateral has lost value. They feel crippled by them. They don't even want. Lenders stop lending, borrowers stop borrowing. Think of the economy as being not creditworthy, just like individual. So what do you do about deleveraging? The problem is that burdens are too high, it must come down. There are 4 ways this can happen. 1. People, businesses, and governments cut their spending. 2. Debts are reduced through poor in restructuring. 3. Wealth in redistribution from the haves to the have-nots. And finally, 4. The central bank prints new money. These 4 ways had happened in every deleveraging in modern history. Usually, spending cut first. As we just saw, people, businesses, even governments tighten the belt to cut their spending so that they can pay back the debt. This is often referred to as austerity. When borrowers stop taking on new debts and start paying the debt over debt, you might expect debt burden to decreases. But the opposite happens. Because spending is cut, and one man's spending is another man's income, it causes incomes to fall. They fall faster than repayment, and the debt burden actually gets worse. As we've seen, this causes spending is deflationary and painful. Businesses are forced to cut costs, which means less job and higher employment. This leads to the next step. Debts must be reduced. Many borrowers find themselves unable to repay the loan, and the borrower's debt and lender's asset. When a borrower doesn't repay with the bank, people get nervous that the bank won't be able to repay them. So they rush to the other money bank. Banks get squeezed, and businesses and banks fold and debt. This is a real economic contraction. It's a depression. A big part of depression is people discovering much of what they thought isn't really there. Let's go back to the bar. When you buy the beer and put it on the bar tab, you promise to repay the bar tab. Your promise became the asset in the bar tab. But if you break a promise, if you don't pay back the debt in the central default can end on your bar tab, and the asset he has isn't really worth anything. It has basically disappeared. Many lenders don't want their asset to disappear and agree debt restructuring. Debt restructuring means lenders get paid back less or get paid back over a longer time frame or lower interest rates than most people agree. Somehow, the contract dispute and new date reduces debt. Lenders would rather have a little of something than all of nothing. Even though debt disappears, debt restructuring causes income and asset value to disappear faster. So the debt burden continues to get worse. Right-cutting spending, debt reduction is all-stopping, poor and deflationary. All of this debt impacts the central government because lower income and less employment means government collects fewer taxes. At the same time, it needs to increase its spending because unemployment. Many have employment and inadequate saving and need financial support from the government. Additionally, a government creates stimulus plan and increases spending to make up for decreases in economy. Government's budget deficits exploding budget leveraging because they spend more at earning taxes. This is what's happening when you hear about budget deficits in all the news. To fund their deficit, governments need to either raise up taxes or borrow money. But with income falling, so many unemployed, who is the money gonna come from? The rich. Since governments need more money in sense wealth is heavily constrained in the hands of a small percentage of people, governments naturally raise taxes on the wealthy, which facilitates the redistribution world economy. But the haves to the have-not, with suffering begin to return to wealthy have. The wealthy have, being squeezed by the weak economy for asset prices and the high taxes, begin to return to have-not. If the depression continues, social disorder can break out. Not only the tension to rise income, they can rise between countries, thus especially debtoring credit in countries. This situation can lead to political change that can be sometimes extreme. In the 1930s, this led Hitler coming to power, war in Europe, then depression in the United States. Pressure to do something to end the depression increases. But remember, most people follow its money exactly per credit. So when credit disappears, people don't have enough money. People are desperate for money. You remember money. The central bank can. Having a very low interest rate nearly zero, it forced to print money. Unlike current spending, debt reduction, and wealth redistribution, printing money inflationary stimuli. Inevitably, central bank prints new money out of thin air and uses it and buys financial assets in government bonds. It happened in the United States during the Great Depression, and again in 2001 in the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve printed over $2 trillion. But other central banks all print a lot of money too. By buying financial assets with this money, it helps drive the up asset prices, which makes people more creditworthy. However, this only happens in one financial assets. You see, the central bank can print money, but it can only buy financial assets. The central government, on the other hand, can buy goods and services and put money in hands of the people, but it can print money. So in order to stimulate the economy to must cooperate. By buying government bonds, the central bank central government allows into more deficit and increases spending on goods and services through stimulus program and unemployment benefits. This increases people's income as well as government's debt. However, it lowering economy total debt burden. This is very risky time. Policymakers in balance of four ways that burdens come down. The deflationary weighs balanced to inflationary. This order maintains stability. It's balanced correctly, there can be a beautiful deleveraging. So deleveraging can be ugly or can be beautiful. How can I be deleveraging be beautiful? Even though deleveraging is difficult situation, handling difficult situation in the best possible way is beautiful. A lot of beautiful that fewer and balanced excesses deleveraging. In a beautiful deleveraging, that's a decline in relative income, real economic growth possible, and inflation isn't the problem. It's achieved by having right balance. The right balance requires a certain mix of cutting spend, reducing debt, transfer wealth, and printing money so that economic and social stability can be maintained. If people accept printing new money raise inflation, it won't offset for credit. Remember, spending is what matters. $1 spending paid for $1 has the same effect on price drop dollars spending paid for credit. By printing money, a central bank can make up for disappearance credit with increase in amount of money. In order to turn around, the central bank needs to not only pump up income growth, but get the rate of income growth higher. The rate of interest rate only can accumulate debt. So what do I mean by that? Basically, incomes to grow faster than debt growth. For example, let's assume our country going through the deleveraging has a debt income ratio 100%. That means the amount that is had is the same the amount income entire country makes in a year. Now to think about the interest rate out there on that. Let's say 2%. If that is going up 2% because that is straight, at income only allows 1%, you will never the debt burden. You need to print enough money to get the rate of income above the rate of interest. However, printing money can easily abuse because it's easily preferred for the upper. The key is printing too much money, causing unstability and high inflation, the way Germany leveraged in 1920s. It policymakers achieved the right balance of the leveraging service the dramatic growth first slow the burdens go down. That's a beautiful deleveraging. When incomes begin to rise, borrowers begin to appear more creditworthy, and when borrowers appear more creditworthy, lenders begin to lending money again. Debt burdens finally begin to fall. If able to borrow money, people can spend more. Eventually, the economy begins to grow again, leading to inflation, bad long-term debt cycle. But the deleveraging process can be hard to handle badly. If handled well, it will eventually promise problem. It takes roughly a decade more for debt burdens for economic activity get back to normal. That's the term lost decade. In closing, of course, the economy is a little bit more complicated than the temporary situation. However, laying the short-term debt cycle along top of the long-term debt cycle and then both the long top of the productivity growth line is a reasonably good template for seeing that where we are now, we were more probably headed. So in summary, 3 rules some are likely to take. First, don't have debt rise faster than income, because debt burdens will eventually crush. Second, don't have income rise faster than productivity, because eventually become incompatible. And third, do all that you can to raise your productivity, because in the long run, that's what matters most. This is simply advice for you, and it's simply advice for policymakers. You might be surprised that most people, including policymakers, don't pay enough attention to this. This template worked well for me, and I hope it will work for you. Thank you. How the economic machine works in 30 minutes. The economy works like a simple machine, but many people don't understand it, or they don't agree on how it works. And this has led to a lot of needless economic time suffering. I feel a thin sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economic template. Though it's unconventional, it's helped me to anticipate the sidestep of global financial crisis, and it's worked well for me for over 30 years. Let's begin. Though the economy might seem complex, it works in a simple mechanical way. It's made of a few simple parts and a lot of simple transactions that are repeated over and over again a zillion times. These transactions and above all else driven by human nature, and they create three main forces that drive the economy. And number one, productivity growth. Number two, the short-term debt cycle. And number three, the long-term debt cycle. Well, look at these three forces, how laying them on top of each other create good templates for tracking economic movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest part of the economy, transactions. An economy is simply the sum of transactions you make it up, and a transaction is a very simple thing. You make a transaction of all the time. Every time you buy something, you create a transaction. Each transaction consists of a buyer exchanging money or credit with the seller for goods, services, for financial assets. Credit just like money, spend just like money. So adding together the money spent and the amount credit spent, you can do on total spending. The total amount spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity sold, you get the price. And that's it. That's a transaction. It's the building block economy machine. All cycles, honor forces, and economy are driven by transactions. So if we understand transactions, we can understand whole economy. A market consists of all the buyers or all the sellers who make transactions for the same thing. For example, the wheat market, a car market, a stock market. A market is for millions of things. An economy consists of all of the transactions all of its market. If you add up the total spending and total quantity sold and all of the market, you have everything you need to understand the economy. It's just that simple. People, businesses, and banks and governments all engage in transactions for ways I just described, exchanging money and credit for goods, services, or financial assets. The biggest of buyer and seller is the government, which consists of two important parts. A central bank government to collect taxes and spends money, and a central bank, which is different from buyers and sellers because it controls the amount of money and credit in the economy. It does this by influencing on interest rate and printing new money. These reasons, as you will see, the central bank important player in the flow of credit. I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably least understood. It's the most important part because the biggest and most volatile part. Just like buyers and sellers go to the market to make transactions, so the lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something you can't afford, like a house or car, when they want to invest in something like starting business. Credit helps both lenders and borrowers get what they want. Borrowers promise to repay the amount borrowed, called principal, plus additional amount called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrow because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay and lenders believe them, credit is created. Any two people can agree on credit out of thin air. That's simple enough. The credit is tricky because it has different name. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is first an asset to the lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability disappear, and the transaction is settled. So why is credit so important? Because of buyer receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because one person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you earn spends someone else earns, and every dollar you earn someone else spends. So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone's income rises, it makes lenders more willing to lend him money because now he's more worthy of credit. A credit is where the borrower has two things: your ability to pay and collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to this debt gives him the ability to repay. And the event that can repay, he has a valuable asset to use as collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable lending him money. So increases spending income allows increases in borrowing, which allows increases spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more income increases borrow, and so on. This self-reinforcing pattern is the economic growth, and is why we have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give something in order to get something. And how much get depends how much you produce. Over time, we know and not accumulated knowledge raises the living standard. We call this productivity growth. Those who inventive and hard-working there is raise in productivity in the living standard best. The nose is complacent and lazy. But that isn't necessarily true of the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver the economy swings. That is because it allows the increase to consume more than we produce when we acquire it, and it forces the consumer less than we produce when you have to pay it back. That swings the economy in two big cycles. One takes about 5 years, the other takes about 75 to 100 years. When most people fear the swings, they typically don't see them cycles because see them to us across, day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we're going to step back and look at these three basic forces and how they interact and make up our experience. As mentioned, the swings are run not due to how much innovation or hard work there is. They are primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way increases my spending is to increase my income, which quality will be more productive and do more work. Increases productivity with way only on growth, since my spending is another person's income. The economy works every day time I want or else productive. If you follow the transactions, we play this out with your progression, but the productivity growth line. But because with borrow, we have cycles. This is due to any more regulation. It's due to human nature and the way the credit works. Think of borrowing, the simplest way of pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow from yourself. In doing so, you create a time in the future that you need to spend less than you make in order to pay it back. It very quickly resembles cycles. Basically, any time you borrow, you create a cycle. This is true individual as it is in economy. This is why understanding credit so wonderful, because it sets into motion a mechanical, predictable series of events that happen in the future. This makes it from protective series events that happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is what you settle transactions with. When you buy your beer from bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy your beer credit, it's like starting a bartender, using to promise to pay in the future. Together, when the bartender created an asset and a liability, you just created the credit out of thin air. It's not until pay the bartender later that the asset and the liability disappear, the debt goes away, and transaction is settled. The reality is that most of people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way increases spending is to produce more. But in an economy with credit, we can also increase spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and allows incomes to rise faster productivity over short run, but not over the long run. Now don't get me wrong. Credit is necessarily something bad that just causes the cycles. It's bad when it finances overconsumption that can't be paid back. However, it's good when we share efficient resources into produce income so you can pay back to them. For example, if we borrow money to buy big TV, doesn't generate income to pay back to them. But if you borrow money to say buy a tractor, and tractor in which to harvest more crops in normal money, then you can pay back to them and produce a living standard. In an economy with credit, it can follow the transaction and see how credit grow. And let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $100,000 even if you don't have no debt. Your credit worthy enough for about $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $110,000 even though you only earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. The person earning $110,000 with no debt can borrow $11,000, so he can spend $121,000, even though he only earns $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transaction, you can begin to see how this process works and a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember, borrowing creates cycles. And if the cycle goes up, it eventually would come down. This is to say into the short-term debt cycle. As the economic activity increases with expansion, the first short-term debt cycle. Spending continues to increase as prices start to rise. This happens because increases spending fueled by credit, which can be out of the air. When your amount spent and income grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation.